Hello, and welcome to The Charge Cycle, an electrifying new podcast on all things fleet electrification. I'm Todd Trauman, I'm the CEO of Emission Control. If you are a procurement manager, a fleet operator, or one of the millions of people tasked with a zero-emission deployment goal, this podcast is for you. We speak with industry experts, funding experts, OEMs, and many others to help you stay ahead of this enormous electrification shift underway. Hello, and welcome back to The Charge Cycle, an electrifying new podcast on all things fleet electrification. I'm Todd Trauman, I'm the CEO of Emission Control, and today I am super happy to be talking with Jamie Madill from the Proclaim Group. They're one of the most interesting and inspiring groups that I've ever seen. Jamie, CFO turned Director of Sustainability, leads a collective of property restoration companies operating in Western Canada. Without a doubt, Jamie is one of the leading EV experts in electrification and procurement, not only in the restoration industry, but in Canada as well. He's helped all 7 Proclaim Group offices begin their journey in electrifying fleets while also embedding purpose-driven sustainability practices into their culture. The Proclaim Group is one of the most inspiring and interesting groups that I've ever been with. We were actually able to meet Jamie last week at his facility in Western Canada. Jamie, he's the CFO turned sustainability director. He's right now leading a collective of restoration companies, and I'd say without a doubt, he's one of the most impressive leaders in the EV adoption, fleet electrification, and procurement spaces I've really ever seen. So I'm really happy to have Jamie here with us today, and I'll also add that he's one of the most personally nicest humans I've ever met. So Jamie, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks. That's quite an introduction. Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Jamie. Give us a little context on your background. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your involvement in the space, kind of talk about really how you got to where you are today and how you arrived really with Proclaim.
Yeah, sure. Well, so to start with, our business is property restoration, fire and flood through insurance claims. We have our headquarters in Richmond, British Columbia in Canada. We're about 300 employees across our group in 7 offices. We focus on, a holistic approach to sustainability in our business. It's something that none of our competition or anybody that in our space really has connected with very much. We've been doing this for a very long time, caring for the planet and diverting waste and trying to enact sustainable business practices in our day-to-day has been something we've been working on for a number of years, but really started to take shape in about 2016. Started by becoming a Climate Smart certified business, the first restoration company in North America to have that distinction. And what that means is that we track and measure all of our greenhouse gas emissions, our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and determine our carbon footprint each year, and work on having a greenhouse gas reduction plan that we adapt and update and enhance every year. We started by just trying to identify our major sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and what we found very quickly was our top 3 in order were transportation at about 65% of our emissions, waste and disposal. Our business of restoring homes has a lot of demolition. We handle and deal with a lot of waste, and that is about 25% of our overall emissions. And finally, we have a large facility, about 50,000 square feet, and so heating and cooling our facility is our 3rd highest source of greenhouse gas emissions. And so since 2016, we've been actively working towards reducing our carbon footprint and our emissions in order of priority, and so that naturally led us to electrifying our fleet.
And so just give us some more context on the company itself. So I've been lucky enough to see one of the many facilities that you guys have, but give us some context on just the general volume. So you guys are working on traditionally residential restoration, but I think there's also some commercial restoration in there. But this is a big operation, and you guys have a large cabinetry shop. You guys do a lot of you have a whole flooring subsidiary orientated to restoration as well. So tell us a little bit more just about the scale of the company, about kind of what you are overseeing here.
Yeah, sure. We do have 7 offices operating in Western Canada. As I said, our flagship is in our headquarters are in Richmond, British Columbia, and we do anywhere from about 1,200 to 1,500 jobs or claims every year. We're a busy outfit, and it's mostly fire and flood at a residential level. We do see lots of multi-unit. We do some commercial restoration, and we're also a purpose-driven company. And I really want to talk about that for a second. We've defined our purpose as a business. From a social responsibility standpoint, but also, it's given us our reason to exist. And so what I'll tell you is that Platinum Proclaim exists to help others in need by developing people, building communities, caring for the planet, and restoring homes. And if we look at everything we do through that lens, and we try to make all of our leadership decisions looking through that lens, you can see that sustainability is kind of woven through that entire statement. When we talk about developing people, the key to sustainability and keeping employment and is to develop people and to give them a career path and something that they can, develop and continue to improve and learn, and that's sustainable because we're not continually onboarding and hiring, and so. If we can retain our staff, that's a sustainable business practice. Building communities, we talk about building a community of EV drivers in our own community, but also we build community around ourselves that focuses on our business. In waste diversion, we're members of the National Zero Waste Council. I sit on a wood waste subcommittee trying to find useful repurposing of wood waste that comes out of our business operations. And so, that's building community. We are very involved in our community. The chambers of commerce, we do shoreline cleanups and these kind of things. We build communities around ourselves, and that is sustainable in itself. Caring for the planet, well, that's easy to define from a sustainability standpoint. And then restoring homes. We see the restoration business as the most sustainable industry that there is. We focus on repairing rather than rebuilding, or restoring rather than replacing. And so when we kind of group all that together and we talk about that as our purpose, it's very easy to see how electrifying our fleet fits into that.
Yeah, a lot of things to peel apart. I think that the workforce development kind of discussion that you're touching on there, I mean, that really just absolutely seeps out of your guys' organization there. And I think that's very, very apparent and something that can be a fantastic model on ultimately what a lot of other groups can see. So kind of to your point on restoration and just the business practices itself, I think kind of to your point, there's a lot of potential lip service given in the industry out there as far as what is actually being restored, or not just being restored, but what is happening with the waste streams themselves. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about the actual business and kind of what is coming in and what is going out, and how is that different than a lot of other organizations in this particular industry?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of transportation. We're coming and going from different job sites all day. We've got moving trucks, moving contents from place to place. That's a big part of what we're doing. But where we really focus a lot of our energy is in diverting waste from the landfill. That's an important part of what we're doing. We're handling and treating a lot of other people's construction and demolition waste, but also, contents, packaging, drywall. All of these things we're handling. We don't own them, but they're part of our business operations. And so what we've tried to do is find as many ways to divert that waste as possible. In British Columbia, we have 26 different extended producer responsibility programs, or EPR programs, designed to have stewardship over different types of waste streams, from tires to solvents to plastic. The most familiar EPR program would be returning bottles and cans. And so each one of these diversion streams is a government program. There's 26 operating in BC. So what we do is we try to separate at source as many of those things so that we're diverting it from the fragile landfill. That's just something that anybody else in our business is not even considering. They're not talking about it. Nobody's asking us to do these things. This is entirely voluntary, and it's because we really see it as, if we don't do it, who will?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of waste management companies out there, again, kind of like putting a lens on maybe diversion in some way, but if you really want to do it well, you really need to get granular on this, and that's kind of something I wanted to ask. When I think of, somebody that's not familiar with restoration and what that means, I think of, okay, maybe some wood waste, maybe some carpets and things, but there's a lot actually in the mix here that really can clog up the system and have really meaningful impact on climate change ultimately, but certainly just other tertiary effects with landfill filling and everything else. So just again, quickly, you mentioned tires and bottles, but it sounds like your guys' approach really is all encompassing. I remember boxes and plastics and baling and liquids and all sorts of things. So kind of what are some of those other additional kind of those 26 different diversionary streams? Like, what are some of the big ones? What are the most meaningful? And really what is being not tackled as much as probably should be across the industry?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the best tools that we have for diverting waste is our baler, and you touched on that. So, we handle a lot of cardboard, a lot of paper, a lot of black plastic, clear plastic. We're able to bale those into 2-ton bricks and then turn that back into a resource, or it's a commodity. And so rather than paying to dispose of it, we're being paid to recover it and enter it, bring it back into the economy in a circular manner. But it doesn't stop there. We also have taken this approach in our cabinet shop. We've got a full service cabinet shop, with 6 full-time cabinet makers, some apprentices, and what we've chosen to do there is something that, again, nobody else is really thinking or talking about or even considering, and that is we've gone completely solvent-free. All of our finishes are waterborne. We see that as not only better for the planet, but better for our staff that are handling these materials while they're making the cabinets.
Less waste, too,
Less
right?
waste. It's much less waste. All of our, sheet goods, all of the products that we use in our cabinet shop are locally sourced, not the less expensive brought in from offshore, and who knows what manufacturing processes used there. We prefer to use good BC plywood and sheet goods because they're of higher quality. They're a little bit more expensive, but formaldehyde free. Just better for people when we're putting cabinets or kitchens back in their homes. It's not off gassing. And trying to really steer away from the damaging materials that are out there in our industry, not only for the homeowners that we're helping, but really for our staff as well that are breathing these things and exposed to them. This all wasn't just flicking a switch. All of these different programs that we have in place, when we started in 2016, we actually had all of these ideas. Every one of these things that we do were brought to us from our staff. It's very much a staff engagement program. And so, things like the baler, I would have never even considered a baler if one of my staff, a guy by the name of JP Lambert, amazing guy, just talked us into it. It was the right thing to do, and it's been one of the best moves we've ever made. But, switching to a solvent-free cabinet shop, that was our cabinet makers, brought these ideas to us. They didn't want to be breathing these things in. And so we try to empower or engage our staff in bringing these ideas forward to us as part of our green team that we have as well, that bring ideas forward that help us become more sustainable and help us come up with a better way of doing business that's more sustainable. It's not just from myself. It's in fact mostly from our staff. So as staff bring these ideas forward and they work, and the rest of the staff see that we've added this thing, we're doing it, it has an impact. Well, then it's self-perpetuating. They're bringing more ideas to the table. We're adopting those things, and then we just have over the years just layered on new practices, and when we find success, then we move on to the next one.
I want to go back to the baler thing just one more time, because I think you're
Sure.
touching on something that's really, really interesting. And, a lot of fleets and a lot of companies, frankly, they look at sustainability and they look at these kinds of initiatives that are implemented, and they feel like they are kneecapping themselves in a way. They're making an economic sacrifice to be able to do so. But I think with your point here, and one of the things that I think is just absolutely beautiful, is that that's not the case at all. The idea here is that you can really do both. It's not an either or, it's an and ultimately. And so the baler is a good example. You turned goods that you were paying to have carted away into a commodity for yourself. So is that kind of a running theme throughout? Does it play hand in hand here? I mean, is how you guys are a private company at the end of the day, right? And so you guys are doing this because you want to. You have nothing to prove to anyone else ultimately, but at the same time, you need to watch what you're doing. And so that seems like that's a philosophy that really sits well with you, and certainly sits well with the wider organization. I mean, it's not a small company at the end of the day. So can you just speak a little bit to that? Like you said, you used to inhibit the CFO position here, right? And so you know a lot about ultimately what the financial elements are and how they're influenced by sustainability programs. So just kind of riff on that a little bit. I think a lot of people would be very interested in hearing about the financial impacts of this stuff.
Absolutely. Well, as we're handling debris, what we decided to do was, just start simply with diverting wood, drywall, and metal. That's where we started, because they were simple things to, source separate at the job site. We were able to set up a wood bin and a drywall bin, side by side with our mixed debris. And, anybody that has to deal with waste knows that it's much less expensive to dispose of wood than, a single stream mixed bin. Metal is, it's a commodity that we get paid for. So separating that is a no-brainer. So, I feel bad for the guys that are just throwing everything into one bin thinking that they're being, efficient and that it's the right way to do it. It's costing them more to dispose of things in that manner. So to talk about the baler, the example I can give you is that and anybody that has a facility of any size is going to have a roll-around bin in their driveway or in their parking lot that's for cardboard. Everybody has a cardboard bin, or anybody that handles cardboard does. So that, fills up, and the dump truck comes, once a week and empties that bin, whether it's full or not. And the economics of that are, it's about $400 to $500 a month to have somebody come and dump your cardboard bin. By having a baler and baling those things and having the wherewithal to, stockpile 10 or 12 or 14 bales of cardboard, we've eliminated that weekly truck run, that truck coming to our facility. So we're keeping vehicles off the road. And then every 1 or 2 months, we have a large flatbed truck from Cascades Recovery come to our facility. We pay the pickup fee, and then everything that we load onto there is basically a commodity. So cardboard, which goes up and down in value, instead of me paying $400 or $500 a month to have somebody take that away, I'm paying that flat pickup rate, and then whatever we load on there cardboard wise, and whatever cardboard happens to be moving at that time, it comes back to us as cash in hand. So, people just have to think about these things a little bit differently. It really doesn't take any more effort. I can tell you that it takes no more effort for our staff to put the debris in this bin as opposed to that bin. It literally is, there's some infrastructure at the very start, but once you get these things in place, it's actually much more cost effective and better for the planet by a long mile.
Yeah, that's a good segue too. So you had mentioned kind of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions at some juncture, and so that's a very good point to make, in that this decision is not just a good financial decision for you, and you yourself are reducing your own scope, I suppose 1 or 2, by making that particular decision itself, but people relying on you and people interacting with you. And as this greenhouse gas world unfolds and people are starting to understand what is happening with other supply chains that they engage with, their scope 3 emissions, you yourself making that decision has kind of made their lives easier in a way, right? So you guys deal with the insurance world as well. I imagine that is a group that is focusing on ESG and carbon reduction and scope 3 as much as anyone else. And so can you kind of talk to that a little bit too? It sounds like, you mentioned you guys are very well planned in each of these initiatives that you unfold, and how you integrate them into your overall operations are very well thought out. It's not just little onesie twosie things here and there. And so as a result, you guys are able to showcase really a more holistic product offering, or maybe a better way to put that is you guys are able to showcase a nice streamlined front as it relates to your understanding of carbon accounting. So is that a fair kind of characterization? Is that, or are you finding these things influencing your guys' actual ability to do new business?
I think we're ahead of the industry. The industry isn't quite ready for what we have to offer from a sustainability standpoint. The insurance industry, much like banks and oil and gas, they're regulated. They have to report their ESG results. Right. What we know, and what the insurance industry hasn't quite grasped yet, is that the restoration contractors are actually the insurance industry's greatest source of scope 3 emissions. And so by working with a company that's focused on reducing their emissions, we're actually helping them achieve their net zero targets, or their zero emission targets. What I really want to say here too is that, we're not doing this because it's a great marketing strategy. We're not interested in lumping ourselves in with businesses that are, adding a little green leaf to their logo and greenwashing their business because it's the right thing to do from a marketing standpoint. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do. And we're not trying to teach anybody any lessons. We're doing it from personal preference first, and we recognize that this is what the industry will require. They need us to have these things in place. They just don't recognize it yet, which is kind of a funny thing. So in a way, we have future-proofed our business.
Yeah, well, we're south of the border. We're based in California, kind of on the tip of this iceberg potentially here, and I think that we start to see it. I know at least nationally, United States, for example, if you are a publicly traded company and you're making net zero commitments, and you now have to back that up and you have to report that to the SEC, right? And so I think it's only the first iteration of many, and I think this serves as a really good example of that opportunity. It's not necessarily you're doing it for marketing purposes, but you are positioning yourself, and that's kind of another good example of a good business decision at the end of the day, as a result of doing the right thing environmentally. You guys are making good business decisions by doing the right thing environmentally, because ultimately it's coming. I'm sure at some point it will show up on RFPs, and you'll need to speak to that, at some juncture down the road. But I think that's a wonderful example of people that think that they are okay to wait until regulation arrives. There's no need to that. No need to do that. I think it's a fantastic kind of business model and decision making example that you guys are setting here. Jamie, you had mentioned before in your own carbon accounting, you had associated a certain volume of that towards the transportation side of things. I know that you guys have dug in quite deeply on the EV side. I'd love to talk about that a little bit, maybe starting again with some context on how large the fleet is now. I do want to kind of give some color to that, just to put that in perspective for most people. But talk to us a little bit more about this electrification journey. Talk to us about what you guys are doing kind of for the wider community there, because I think all of that is wildly inspiring.
Yeah, sure. Well, so in 2016, when we became Climate Smart certified, one of our accounting manager at the time, a fellow by the name of Liam Jonas, he just was so passionate about EVs. He was like, our greatest source of emissions is transportation. I think we need to tackle this. Let's try it, and at that time, I think we had about 80 plus vehicles. And to be clear, our fleet is a mix of, service vehicles, kind of medium duty vehicles, and then sedan type SUV vehicles. So you've got your administrative staff and our project management teams and our executives driving, sedan SUV vehicles, which really in 2016 were the only type of EV you could get. That's becoming more available now. So really, we could only tackle that portion of it when we first set out. We only really had access to sedans, Chevy Volts, Teslas. These were the only vehicles available to us in 2016. And only about 25% of our fleet would have been eligible because there was no vans, there was no cargo vehicles available at the time. So the best we were ever going to be able to hit at that time was 25%, because that's how our mix was. It was about 75% service and medium and heavy duty vehicles, dump truck, moving truck, cargo vans for our field staff, and that's the workhorse of our fleet. And so we just started very small. We with 80 vehicles, we've got a pretty robust program of taking on new vehicles every year. We kind of take on 6, 8, 10 vehicles a year, and so it was no big deal to introduce a couple of EVs into that. Now, what I would say is that at the time, nobody wanted them. There was a real pushback. Like the range anxiety was a real thing.
Is this staff too?
This is our staff. Yeah, that's right. So our staff are like, ooh, I don't know. I'm not going to be able to get to work and back. How's this going to work? What if I run out of energy? It just isn't like that, as you know better than anybody. But so we combated that by starting with the Chevy Volt, which at the time was a good starter EV, if you will, in that it's got its onboard generator for charging the battery when the 80 to 100K of battery range wore down. And so it helped people understand how to use an EV. And so starting with a kind of that plug-in hybrid was a really good starter, because it kind of got people used to it. We've been kind of brand agnostic with vehicles, but from starting with 3 Chevy Volts in our first year and 2 level 2 chargers, we just started adding each year. We the following year we had another couple of chargers, so we had 5, and then we added we had 9 Chevy Volts by the end of the second year, and then we started to look at Teslas. Tesla was way ahead of everybody else on the charging infrastructure. Now we're into 2018, and we're really starting to see a benefit. We saw unbelievable savings in our fuel just there. People started to become more comfortable. They realized that range anxiety was just not a thing, that but they could charge their vehicles while they're at work, they could plug in overnight, and they had plenty of range. And so breaking those myths was very simple for us, because it just naturally happened. People got used to it and they figured it out. And so as we started to see a real remarkable savings in just our fuel purchases, but also a major reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions, we saw an immediate impact to our annual certification through Climate Smart and our measurement of our carbon footprint. It just started to really make sense to us. So we set that target of being 25% EV by 2023. As we had access to more types of vehicles, we started to get a couple of Ford Escape EVs. In 2021, we got access to the Ford E-Transit, which was the real game changer for us, where we were able to, adopt our service vehicles into our fleet. And then we just most recently purchased a 3-ton electric moving truck called a Lion 6 that's made here in Canada, and we now have 18 chargers, 26 EVs in our fleet, and our fleet is 102 vehicles. So we've hit our 25% target. Pretty happy about that. We've now set a target of 50% EV by 2026. That may be a little bit more challenging, perhaps a little more aggressive than, but you got to set a target that's tough to achieve, or not worth it.
Yeah, it's really incredible too. I think that's a fantastic goal and extremely achievable with people like you at the helm here, kind of deciding what to do and what to pick and how to make it all happen. Can you talk a little bit too? I recall you mentioning some element of public accessibility for your level 2 chargers you have in your particular parking lot. I thought that was really cool, and a good story, but also very good for the community out there that are also struggling with the same sort of questions that you guys are as a business about range anxiety and other sort of issues that kind of come along with this. So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me about that. When we first installed our chargers, we were faced with this choice of going with Wi-Fi enabled or just regular level 2 chargers, and we chose to go with the less expensive that non-Wi-Fi enabled that weren't eligible for a rebate because they were a third the price of the ones that were eligible for a rebate. So it just made good sense to us to buy those. The drawback was that they're available to the public. They're not you didn't have to tap an RFID card or anything like that.
Can't tell when they're on
right.
Off,
so
right.
so we at the very very beginning we made a philosophical decision to make those available to the public. We ask that that the general public during business hours kind of limit their charging to an hour if they need to top up, but after general business hours and on the weekends, we make them wide open for anybody in our community to use. Part of that is just being a good corporate citizen. Part of it is to accelerate the advent of the adoption of EVs in our community. And part of it is just because we know that it's a negligible cost. So that's actually been one of the least expensive marketing things we've ever done. We're very well known for it. There's almost always vehicles that aren't ours charging in our parking lot. We were on PlugShare, so people would know how to find us, and it's just created a really great sense of community, and also we get a lot of just it's just goodwill we get from as I leave for the day, I'm talking to these people that are coming into our parking lot, plugging in their cars, and just, how'd you hear about us? What brought you here? And it just engages them in conversation. And but it's so that in itself has kind of built community around us, and so we're quite well known in our little city of Richmond for being guys that allow anyone to charge in our facility. But what I can tell you is that because of when we first moved into our facility, a huge facility with a huge consumption of natural gas to heat and cool, and
that was in 2015, right?
Yeah, and the lighting itself. So we had 60 plus metal halide lights in our warehouse. Well, those are a huge draw. We changed those all over to motion sensing LEDs, and so by adding these 18 EV chargers, we actually still haven't hit the same level of consumption that when we first moved into this facility and converted those lights. My electricity bills are the same as they were 7 years ago, even though we've added these 18 chargers. So my point is that the cost has been negligible. The benefit to the community is immeasurable. And the goodwill that it generates is just something that people are talking about, and we feel great about. It's a really good feeling to know that we're taking a leadership role in there, and we just really believe that it's better to lead than to follow.
That's incredible. I think that's really true, and there are a lot of people that don't have the willingness to take that first step without having seen someone else do it before. And not only is that just a friend or someone across the street, that is a private enterprise, a private company willing to do so and take that risk. And I think that's a really, really great story. And I think that a lot of people would ultimately commend you guys for doing so, and also the recognition that it's not really that painful for the company at the end of the day to offer such a unique and helpful service to the local community. So I'm really inspired by that. Jamie, I understand that PPCR is actually part of a larger group, or there is some connection with you personally with a wider group of restoration companies, and that you've actually made some headway in helping some of these other groups also understand really what you're doing with your company and helping with some of the sustainability initiatives and understanding how those do or don't affect the bottom line for you. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about really what you've been doing for those groups, because I think a lot of other companies in a variety of industries could learn a lot from your guys' lessons here. So Can you take a minute and just kind of explain really where you guys are in that process and what you've done for other groups?
Yeah, sure. So, we're now 7 offices, but in 2019, we were just the single office. So we've expanded fairly quickly in a fairly short period of time. Our other offices are in Calgary, Alberta, Canmore, Alberta, on Vancouver Island. So we're, over a fairly wide geographical area. When we brought these other organizations into our group, it was very important to us that they were all Climate Smart certified as well, and that they all understood what their greenhouse gas emission sources were, that they had a baseline to measure their carbon footprint. And so, we formed a little cohort of our own, offices, and we all became Climate Smart certified. So we can say that moving forward, but we're also part of a larger cross-Canada Association of Restoration Contractors called GUS, and that's a Quebec-based organization and with over 150 offices. And through our affiliation with them and our passion for being sustainable and bringing these concepts to the regular day-to-day business of restoration, we've inspired that group to want to form a national sustainability program, which would be the first of its kind. And so I'm in the midst of developing that with a core group of the people from there. But I'm leading that in that we're trying to come up with our own type of certification where we can all follow a list of greenhouse gas reduction ideas, or from a checklist of here's some things that you can do, and so that we can all collectively make a huge impact on reducing our carbon footprint as a whole and making an impact in our industry. One of our stated goals is to elevate our industry, and that's one of the ways we can do that is to bring sustainability to those other offices and to those other businesses. I can tell you that it's not as easy as it sounds. We've failed a couple of times. It's been difficult. It's not easy to get people to grasp the importance and why this is a planet. There's no business on a dead planet. So trying to help people understand these things is not as easy as it sounds, especially in the rural communities, the smaller offices, the people that see this as, oh, it's just another expense I've got to absorb. So we're really we're at this next phase of our growth in sustainability and trying to bring this to a wider group. Having somebody like the Climate Smart or the Green Business Bureau in the States, having them as a third-party verification in this, it kind of validates what we're doing. We're not just saying it. We're actually able to have a third party show and demonstrate that we've actually made an impact. And if we can get that happening throughout that wider group, what a big difference that will make to the planet, and so ultimately that's my goal, is to try to take this small success story that we've had at PPCR, bring that to a wider group, and then demonstrate in a measurable way how we're impacting sustainable business practices in our industry.
So just to clarify too, the GUS group is a group of other restoration companies. These
That's
are
right.
people that may or may not inherently be competitive by nature. And so your what you're deciding to do here is really a philosophy of all, if rising tides lifts all boats here, where a shared allocation of understanding on sustainability initiatives can really have a meaningful impact on an industry-wide scale here. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it this way, that we have the British Columbia Construction Safety Alliance that we participate in, and so we have a subgroup of all restoration contractors. All of my competition, all of the other restoration contractors in our province subscribe to that Construction Safety Alliance, and so we've chosen as an industry to not compete on safety. And what I'm trying to do is, what I'd love to see happen is take that same approach to sustainability. If we could just all work towards this and not see it as a competitive edge, but more as a collective potential that we can all make an impact if we don't compete on these things, I believe that it could be, an amazing result. And so when we think of it, across this GUS group of 150 other offices, think of the impact that could be if we weren't competing on this level. It's to me, it feels like we could change the world.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, again, as big as it seems, it's also just one particular industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very good lesson learned opportunity there amongst many industries. I think about it of my own and ways that I could hopefully streamline things that ultimately help the planet amongst my own particular industry, because we speak the same lingo and we understand each other's worlds. And I think that's a really good opportunity to help kind of move the needle on the climate change state of affairs for each of us. And so, the other surprising element of that is the willingness of buy-in too. People really do want to learn more about what each other are doing, what makes the most sense, not just on the bottom line, but for climate change across the whole. So I feel like that that opportunity, it feels almost olive branchy, but it's not, right? I think there's a collective working group effort and interest amongst industry, certainly amongst competitors, to really collaborate and work better to make everyone more successful at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, let's be frank. Every single business that we know of has somebody that's a climate champion that wants to make a difference. Everybody has somebody in their business. It's this thing that more people want to do what they, it's human nature is that we want to do something better for ourselves and for the planet and for our community. And so, we also view it as, that's, for us, it's a real, employee attraction. It's a recruitment strategy in its own way without, stating that or making it public, but people that see what we're doing and that want to do that are attracted to us, and so we're not faced with this same great resignation that lots of other businesses and industries have been subject to. We haven't had staffing issues, and so my connection there is that people want this, and they want to work for a business that's purpose-driven, that has these goals and values, and that is working towards making the world a better place. That's where the youth of today want to be employed. And so it's not only self-perpetuating an employee retention strategy, it kind of grows exponentially. The more people that we get that come and join our organization that have this mindset, makes it easier to make a bigger impact. So it's really kind of cool how it self-perpetuates and it just kind of grows like an amoeba.
Jamie, similarly in the EV space, certainly in California, Oregon, Washington, the U.S. states right now, there are active low carbon fuel standards, which do have a pretty meaningful influence on the bottom line of EV procurement. Certainly helps shake out TCO analysis, if nothing else. They're one of the most meaningful incentives available to fleets today. I know that you guys are starting to understand that, experiment with that. British Columbia now has electrification provisions within the low carbon fuel standard in British Columbia. Can you talk a little bit about your guys' participation in that and what kind of influence that's having on your decision making for future acquisition and rollout of EVs?
Yes, certainly. It's all relatively new to us. British Columbia is kind of leading the way. We're kind of piloting the program through with another group called Radical Climate Smart. They're helping us to adopt the low carbon fuel standard. In a nutshell, our understanding is that, by providing our own vehicles with a low carbon fuel, i.e. electricity, rather than filling up our cars with fossil fuels, we have basically become a low carbon fuel distributor. That makes us eligible to generate our own carbon credits and therefore create an opportunity, an economic opportunity that was unasked for, unlooked for. We didn't even know it was there. So we anticipate that this could bring us, just through the simple action of charging our EVs at our facility, we're talking about $40,000 to $60,000 revenue annually in generation of carbon credits. So it's a remarkable program. I think this is the one thing that's going to really accelerate the adoption of fleets in Canada, certainly. I think once people figure it out and recognize that this is an opportunity that's available to them, it's going to make electrifying fleets a lot easier, a lot more accessible, and a lot more economically viable.
Yeah, I know they've been very, very meaningful south of the border for sure, and I think that we're equally excited to see it happen in BC. There's another program very similar opening federally for Canada in the middle of this particular year, and the idea here is that, yeah, it's really meant to help offset that fuel cost, that electricity as a fuel cost for electric fleets. And when you add that up over time, it's quite substantial. It can be quite it can be orders of magnitude more influential than any particular incentive made available even. So it's great to hear that you guys are participating in that. It's also a good lesson, a good word to the wise there, that the energy consumption data is the important element there, right? I think that was kind of a thing to note, that you guys had to go with a networked system, and also as part of the decision making on the charging systems going in. If you want to participate, you really have to ensure that you're selecting the right hardware, or have a way to go about metering or some other element there to make sure you're capitalizing on the low carbon fuel standard.
That's right. And it is confusing for a lot of people. There is a lot of hoops to jump through to get registered and participate in the program. So what we hope is that we're going to clear a lot of those hurdles so that other companies can jump on board a little easier, and we can be an example for others to follow.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Jamie, I just want to bring this full circle too. So obviously you're making a lot of wonderful connections between really the business case here and sustainability. Sustainability, I think now, as you're demonstrating, is really interwoven amongst workforce development and energy policy internally, and all sorts of different elements for businesses. And I think that whether you're out in the warehouse or you're in the back office in the C-suite, you're having some sort of a decision making going on internally about how to tackle sustainability these days. And it also feels though that there is just a tidal wave, maybe a bad pun considering the topic, but a tidal wave of information out there, and no one is really sure where to start. I think that people are very gun shy about pulling the trigger on anything because they are really not sure what to do after they've started their first Google. And so considering you guys are quite far down the road here and have already gained a lot of experience and understand next steps and have goals in place for fleet electrification and all manner of things, if you were to give one kind of closing remark or one last point of advice to a new company that is looking to jump in, what would you suggest as a good next step or idea?
Yeah, you just have to start. You have to do something, not nothing. That's really an important concept, that start with something as simple as creating a recycling area in the kitchen in your office. Everybody has a responsibility to this planet, and so any step that you take is going to make a difference. And so it doesn't matter how small that step is, you got to take it. And I'll say also, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis, trying to figure out, oh, geez, jump this way, jump that way. Oh, is it the right thing for us to do? You have to take some risk. You have to try some of these things out. If you can just avoid listening to the misinformation that's out there, particularly about EVs, have an open mind and have that mindset of doing the right thing and doing something and not nothing.
That's a recurring theme, I think, with our guests on this particular show, is that the worst thing you can do is wait. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't let analysis paralysis stop you. Just try something, and that will get you moving. That the writer's block, I think, that happens often as people try to understand what to do with sustainability or ESG or scoping plan analysis or whatever, definitely occurs. But I think it's any of the incremental first steps that just get that momentum going. Just a tiny little bit will be enough, it sounds like. And I agree. I think that's quite sage advice. So, Jamie, I want to say thank you very much for attending the podcast today. I'm very happy about all the progress made that Platinum Pro Claim restoration has made over the years, and we're looking forward very much to hearing more about your continued deployments and your thought leadership in the space of all things greenhouse gas reduction, but certainly in the restoration ecosystem. So, Jamie, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being brought onto your podcast. anything we can do to help elevate electrification and sustainability, we're happy to be involved in.
Sounds great. And to the listener, thank you for tuning in to the Charge Cycle, where we talk all things fleet electrification. We'll be back next time, and until then, get out there and get plugged in.